All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. All right, so here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guests today, Donna, Jenson, and Reena Bernards. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So Donna Jenson is founder and director of Time to Tell, with a mission to spark stories from lives affected by incest and sexual abuse to be told and heard. She wrote and performs her one-woman play, What She Knows, One Woman's Way Through Incest to Joy, which is based on her own experience of surviving incest. She leads writing mindfulness workshops for survivors interested in finding their voice and using it. She also has performed her play and led workshops at correctional facilities, colleges, police departments, conferences for mental health professionals, and sexual assault advocates, community organizations, and facilities, among other places. Reena is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in Maryland and Washington, D.C. She's also certified as an emotionally focused therapist and works with individuals, couples, and families using a trauma-informed and attachment lens. She also works as an intergroup dialogue consultant and trainer. Welcome, ladies. Before we get going here, Donna, I just want to say this is your second time on the podcast. Welcome back. Great to have you back here. Reena, before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Okay. I'm originally from New York. I was born in upstate New York, lived most of my childhood in New York City, and now I'm in Tacoma Park, Maryland.
Okay. And Donna, how about you?
So I grew up in the Midwest, North Dakota and Wisconsin. And then spent 25 years in Brooklyn, New York.
Wow.
And for the last 30 years, I've been here in Western Mass in a tiny little town called Leverett.
Okay. And why are you here together today?
Because we really wanted to let your audience know about some things that we're doing in the survivor community. For survivors, not only in the survivor community, but for survivors, for healing and empowerment.
Okay. So, and Reena, what are those things that you're doing?
Well, one of the things we're doing, and this is going to be in January, we are leading a workshop for therapists on helping survivors heal from sexual trauma. And this is going to be an online workshop. We welcome anybody that wants to join, any therapist in particular. We think this is a really unusual model, having a therapist and a survivor there to present together.
Okay.
Most therapy trainings do not have the advantage of somebody that has experienced therapy on sexual abuse and can tell us what works and what doesn't work.
Okay. Now we will get into that in more depth, but before we
Sure.
do, and I know you're wanted to, we will get there.
Sure.
But Reena, I want to know a little bit more about you. How did you get into this?
Well, my professional career took many turns and bends. I was a community organizer. I spent a lot of time working on Middle East peace process, particularly in the Jewish community. And then I became an intergroup consultant, working on bringing people from different communities together. And Donna did some of that work with me, with Jews and Palestinians, Blacks and Whites, and others.
So hang on, if I may. So an intergroup consultant bringing groups together. So when you said Black and White, am I to assume that these are ostensibly competing groups, or
not necessarily competing,
okay,
but groups that want to understand each other better.
Okay.
And the model is usually having dialogue workshops. So then I became a family therapist. As I said, it's been a long and interesting road. And as a family therapist, I became very interested in trauma. Some of this has to do with my personal background. I healed from a trauma of losing a brother at age 20. I had just given him a kidney, and he died 4 months later.
Wow.
And that was like an axe falling in my life. And I needed ways to heal from it. And the process of healing helped me become very interested in trauma and how you can heal from trauma. And interestingly enough, that is around the time that I met Donna. We were both in a peer counseling group, both working on our own very different kinds of trauma. And maybe you want to talk about that, Donna.
Thanks for sharing that, Reena. Yeah, please, Donna.
And I want to say that I didn't come out as a survivor until I was in my early 30s, which is not uncommon, but it was within this peer counseling setting that I was able to really begin to own my experience and start dealing with all the feelings, the shame, the isolation, blah, 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 all of that. And Reena was one of my major peer counselors for that. So
if I may, this peer counseling group, what was it? What was this group? You were peers in what capacity?
Well,
Go ahead, Donna.
We weren't professional counselors necessarily, even though I had a degree in counseling from NYU with a master's. But it was a whole process of just learning how to listen well to one another and to accept the expression of feelings, especially crying, yelling, laughing, shaking. This group really believed that that a lot of the trauma is held because the feelings get held back. And by releasing the feelings, discharging the feelings, you start healing from it. And it's absolutely true. It wasn't all of my healing journey, but it was certainly the start of it. Yeah.
Okay. And so how did it come that you began working together to create this program?
Well, I just want to say that Donna was the first survivor that I ever worked with in a healing capacity. And these were very early days of her coming out as a survivor. And I remember how delicate the time was together. If Donna said, you need to sit on the other side of the room and not look at me, I would do that.
Yes.
And it just really ingrained in me that you really have to go with what the survivor needs. And this was long before I became a therapist, but that experience really informs me as a therapist today, particularly when working with people who have survived sexual trauma.
Right.
That experience of her saying, you know what, you need to go. I don't look at me.
Don't look at me. Don't touch me.
Don't ask me any questions.
Don't ask any questions. Right.
And Reena, what was it about that specifically that affected you so strongly?
I was impacted by the need for Donna to feel empowered and that she was in control of this healing process. And how important that is with the clients that I work with now. When the issue becomes sexual trauma, that the issue of empowerment and them needing to lead the way. But the other piece of it is that I love this phrase, undoing aloneness, that you are there to be there with them as they're going through this journey.
Undoing aloneness. Okay.
Because when you're a survivor, you feel extremely alone. You were very alone in the midst of the harm. And so you kind of figure you've got to stay alone for the rest of your life. And
Mhm.
the culture doesn't help. The culture doesn't want to know your story, doesn't want to hear your story. So you remain alone and not belonging anywhere. So it's really important component to the healing process for a therapist to understand that dynamic.
Donna, you said, in a not uncommon way, it took you a while to quote unquote come out as a survivor. What were the circumstances such that you did feel comfortable coming out as a survivor?
Well, let's say I think what led up to it is I was involved in the women's movement, the second wave of the women's movement, and so I was running support groups where women were talking about things they had never spoken of before. So it was like I was already opening up a layer of, reveal in those circles, even though I wasn't yet talking about being a survivor. I was very close with one of these peer counselors, and she had a feeling, she had a hunch that there was something in me that said, there was a relationship with, well, I'll tell you the story. So she said to me one night, she said, I've got this article I want to read to you because you have told me 3 times now that you were so impressed with going to one of our workshops, a retreat that the peer group went to, the counselors, and that all the people who were survivors of child sexual abuse went off on their own, for a night, we would divide up into groups all the time. The Jews would go one place, the gay and lesbians would go another, we would go by identities from time to time to talk, to feel the feelings from that identity. So, and I guess I told her multiple times, they don't, we had this whole thing about, sometimes you need to scream out your anger, right? But because we were in, like these retreat places, we would scream into a pillow so that you weren't disturbing the place, right? They didn't make the survivors scream into a pillow. And I must have told this gal 3 times, I can't believe it. They didn't have to scream into pillows. And it just triggered something in her. And she said, I just want to read you this. And I have tried to find this article, guy. I can't find the dang article. But it was a woman's story of, coming out as a survivor of incest, and what it meant for her to, well, halfway through the article, I am just weeping. I am limp weeping, laying on this woman's lap, saying, me too, me too. That's the way it happened.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's intense.
Yeah, right.
I mean, to say the least, I mean, that imagery of not screaming into a pillow is really profound.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of jump ahead to how you decided to create this program, this workshop, and what's the name of it?
Helping Survivors Heal. What's the last? Have you got it right in front of you?
Trauma and attachment approach.
Right. So the way it got started was, I was at this big gathering of survivors near Boston. I was helping the leaders do what they had to do, and one of them said, Donna, would you please do a workshop for therapists? I'd never done a workshop for therapists. And I said that to them. They said, oh, you just bring them in the room and you just talk to them and it'll be great. Yeah, I said, okay. So a bunch showed up. And what's interesting is they were all survivors and therapists. So I didn't have to worry about any therapy stuff. I just approached them as survivors and what it was. And we had a wonderful time, and it was great. And in fact, they came back for a couple of one-on-one sessions afterwards. But so I was telling this to Reena, and she just lit up. She said, why don't we do that? And so, it was in the spring we started planning this, to do that, because we've worked together so long around so many issues that it was just sort of a no-brainer. I mean, yeah.
So helping survivors to heal from sexual trauma and attachment approach. And Reena, what was your thought? What were your thoughts about creating this program and bringing Donna into it?
Right. So the kind of work I do, people don't come to me because they want to heal from sexual trauma. Sexual trauma emerges as they're talking about their life. And we discover that that's going on. And so I think that's true for a lot of therapists. I mean, when you look at the number of people, statistically, the number of people that have experienced sexual trauma, I think it's over 80% for women. So that means that there are therapists that have clients who have experienced sexual trauma. And even if they don't look at it that that's their field or that's what they're going into, they're there sitting in their office. And so my thought is that therapists need to figure out how to work with these clients, and how to work with them on their sexual trauma. And what better way than combining with Donna's expertise in working with survivors and hearing all their complaints about bad experience with therapists. So we have a part of our workshop where we talk about do's and don'ts. And I'm going to talk about the do's, and Donna's going to talk about the don'ts, because of what she's heard and probably experienced herself from people that mean well, but don't necessarily have the wherewithal to really manage these kinds of issues.
Now, I'm going to ask first you, Reena, and then you, Donna. So, Reena, what is it about you? What do you feel it is about you that enables you to do this specific work?
Really great question. I think part of it is, as I mentioned, healing from my own trauma. So being able to go very deep inside myself. It took me about 8 years of consistent work to heal from the death of my brother. And Donna was a part of that grieving process. And I grieved like nobody's business, just really in-depth crying and experience. So I know the benefit of bringing in the body as part of the healing process. I know that you can face really awful feelings and come out the other side. And I'm kind of just the kind of person that goes for hard things. So working Israeli Palestinians, right now I'm involved in a project where we bring conservative and liberals together here in this country. So this is just sort of part of my DNA. I can't quite explain it.
Right. Now, when you say,
wait, can I add one more thing about her?
Sure.
I want to just say, she is so relaxed. She is so welcoming of no matter how deep the feelings are. She doesn't get scared, which is really, for survivors, it's really important, because people are afraid of just the label, let alone going anywhere with it. So
yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that.
Sorry, I just had to jump in there.
No. That's what this is all about here. Jumping in is fine. Reena, one more thing. So when you say the body, talk a little bit more about that. The importance of bringing that in. What for you, what does that mean?
So you talked about how I'm an emotionally focused, certified as an emotionally focused therapist. And emotionally focused therapy is based on the notion of the importance of feelings, and feelings are experienced in the body. So when we're working with someone, may say, where on or in your body do you experience that? And getting them in touch helps them to get closer to the feelings. So that's one thing that I think is very important. There's a whole school of somatic experiencing and processing trauma through the expression of the body.
Mhm.
When trauma happens, the body's natural healing process is cut off. So creating experiences where that natural healing can occur is really important. And I talk about it as an attachment injury because particularly sexual trauma is always an attachment injury. It's always about another human being hurting you, and breaking that sense of safety and trust. So you, as a temporary attachment person, as you know, you're building a relationship of trust with your client.
Awesome. So, Donna, as part of this, what do you want to bring to this workshop, to these therapists?
Well, okay, I'll just say what came off the top of my head. I should probably have a perfect soundbite, but I don't. I want to bring to them an understanding that this is an issue that can be addressed, that this is an issue that can be worked on in therapy. Because one of my don'ts is many survivors have reported to me their therapist saying, when they disclose, well, I think you have a lot of other issues that you need to deal with before we go here. And you've just lost that person. Even if they stay in therapy, you have lost them as a place to heal as a survivor once you do that.
Because
well, they're telling you, no, this is, I don't want to hear this right now. I want to hear
or I can't hear this. I can't.
Well, that's what I think they're saying.
Right.
I mean, they're not saying that, but that's an assumption that I then take on, that
Right.
They're not ready to hear. And I understand they may not be ready to hear it, but then you should refer them to someone who is ready and able and interested. Not everybody wants to do this work, and you shouldn't have to do this work. But if you have someone reveal in therapy and it's not the work you're accustomed or ready or whatever, you need to refer them out, because if we come out and we get shut down, it could be a long time before we come out again. So, and for many people, a therapist can be the first place that they reveal, very, very first, beyond but before anybody else. So that's one of the things I really would hope got driven home, in our workshop. Yeah.
There's a statistic, and Reena, you might be more up to date on this than I am, but and then Donna, you said it took you a long time, but oftentimes it takes survivors many years to disclose. Is that changing now? Is that
Great
time?
That is a great question. I think a little bit. I do think a little bit. I mean, there's just so much more out there now than there was. When I started 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, there was nothing. There was not the understanding, let alone the organizations and, all the stuff that now exists as resources for survivors. So where was I going with this? What do we start this out with?
So it's more likely that a survivor will disclose sooner now than it was in the past.
Yeah. There's more opportunities for disclosure. Yeah.
Right. More books out that they can read.
Yeah.
Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Donna Jenson and Reena Bernards. The name of the workshop is Helping Survivors to Heal from Sexual Trauma and Attachment Approach. It's a workshop for therapists. Friday, January 13th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on Zoom. And is this a one-shot deal?
Oh, we don't know.
Well, in other words, for this workshop, it's just on Friday, 10 to 1. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But we might do more. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Right.
Now, yes, I know we'll send everyone to this website and people can look at it. But for our listeners here, who's this for? Therapists, yes, but more specifically, who's it for?
I really think it's for any therapist that's interested. So I had a colleague come over and I was telling her about the workshop and she says, well, I don't really work with those constituents. And I said, oh, yes, you do.
Right.
if 80% of women have experienced some kind of sexual trauma, whether it's harassment or assault or incest or whatever, they're showing up in your office, right? They may not be talking about it, or they may have talked about it once and you didn't pick up on it or something. It may not be what drew them to therapy, but it's there in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought is that every therapist is seeing clients that have sexual trauma in their background, and it can only help for us to learn how to deal with it and to face our own. Part of our workshop is giving people a chance to face what gets in their way. And we're very accepting, whatever gets in the way is okay to talk about.
Yeah.
Donna, in your excuse me, healing in your journey, did you see a lot of therapists?
Yeah, I had a bunch.
And did you see therapists in order to work with your trauma?
I'll tell you, my first therapist had nothing to do with my trauma, but I know she laid the groundwork. But I went to her when I was thinking about leaving my marriage. And it was really because I went to a therapist to help me figure out how to deal with my then 6-year-old daughter, and how do I, anyway, so that was my very first therapist experience. And then I had another therapist that I went to see very much for the purpose of dealing with the trauma. And I wanted to see her one-on-one. And she said, no, I think you should be in a group. And so she had a group of women who were all survivors. And so I spent probably a year with that. And then I came back to her and I said, I really want to see you one-on-one. She was amazing. Gail Bowman, I'll never forget her. And she said, no, I think you should go to this place out in Phoenix called The Meadows. And they have a week-long intensive for survivors of incest. And I think it is just incest.
Wow.
And it was knockdown, drag out, amazing transformation stuff that happened there. And so I came back and went back to her and she said, no, I think I should be in a group that's got men in it, women and men, not necessarily survivors. And I said, oh, yeah. But it was perfect because it was the first time I confronted a man with real passion and anger. I was too afraid of men to do that. So, and then I did 2 different therapists later on, where we did both talk therapy and EMDR, which was phenomenal work. Yeah.
Wow. So as we kind of wind down here, Reena, what do you feel walking into this workshop here? Are there any kind of fears or hesitancies that therapists have about working with this topic
that I've seen with people?
Yeah.
Yes. I think one thing is if you've had unprocessed sexual trauma in your own life, that it can make it very difficult to be there for others. And another is if you're a very cognitive therapist and you don't do that heart to heart, body awareness, emotional work, I think that can get in the way as well. But my hope is that people will start this journey and become more comfortable and do more trainings. I think training in trauma is really important.
Donna Jenson, Reena Bernards, thank you so much for being here. Again, the workshop is called Helping Survivors to Heal from Sexual Trauma, an Attachment Approach, workshop for therapists. And we'll have that linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Is there a particular URL for this workshop specifically? Can it both be gotten to on your websites, both your websites?
If you go to either of our websites, you get a link to, under trainings, you get a link to the workshop.
Okay. Awesome.
You want me to put it to the in the chat?
No, people are not going to be seeing this in the chat, but I'll have it linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. I'll also include it in my upcoming newsletter too.
Oh, thank you so much.
Definitely.
Can I just say one final thing?
Of course.
We are ending our workshop with a piece of music, and it comes from Donna's one-woman play, which she performed. She has original music by a musician there, and the song he wrote is called "It Was Never Your Fault." Is that right, Donna?
It wasn't your fault. Yeah,
it wasn't your fault.
Which he composed after getting to know me.
Yeah, and it's written as kind of adult to child, and it's just a beautiful song. And I think that phrase, "It wasn't your fault," is so important when working with survivors.
Yeah,
appreciate that. Well, awesome having both of you here. I'm excited to hear how this workshop turns out. I think it's going to be great. You both have beautiful presences individually, and together it feels very powerful. So I want to thank you both for being here.
Well, thank you. It was a delight to be with you again, guys.
Awesome. All right, take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I want to thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and I want to let you know that I am very excited about my new podcast, The Right Now Project. The Right Now Project is about healing. It's about stepping into our own courage and authenticity and getting started or continuing along our healing process. We're all going through something, whatever it is, in this crazy life we're living. And the Right Now Project is about honoring that, celebrating that, and sharing our stories via the associated membership site. Check us out at therightnowproject.com, therightnowproject.com.